The morning sun poured through the tall windows of her downtown Atlanta condo, casting long golden rectangles across the hardwood floor. She stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the collar of her navy blue suit. Tailored, not flashy, but cut just right to fit her shoulders without pulling. She'd worn this suit to present research at a national medical conference last year, and again when she'd accepted a teaching award from the hospital. Today it felt right for a different kind of milestone. She wasn't going to a lecture hall or an operating room. Today was for herself. For the past 12 months, her days had blurred together in a rhythm of early rounds, late-night calls, and the quiet, heavy moments in hospital rooms where hope and fear sat side by side. She'd held the hands of parents while explaining treatment plans, celebrated small victories like a child eating solid food again, and cried silently in the on-call room after losing a patient she'd grown close to. It had been a year of giving everything, her time, her energy, her heart. And now, finally, something good was coming back to her. Last week, the hospital's annual bonus statements had arrived. Hers was larger than expected. Not just buy a nice dinner large, but you've earned something meaningful large. And for months, she'd had her eye on one particular piece of jewelry, a diamond tennis bracelet she'd seen during a rare lunch break at a high-end boutique in Buckhead. She hadn't gone in that day. She'd just paused outside the window, admiring how the light caught each stone, how delicate yet strong it looked. It wasn't about showing off. It was about marking a moment, a symbol that she'd made it through the storm, that her work mattered, and that she deserved to treat herself with the same care she gave her patients. She slipped on a pair of simple black heels, comfortable enough to walk in, elegant enough for where she was going, and grabbed her purse. Inside, nestled beside her phone and keys, was her Black American Express card. She'd paid it off every month without fail, and today she intended to use it for something that brought her joy. The drive to Buckhead was smooth. Traffic was light for a Thursday afternoon. She rolled down the window slightly, letting the warm Georgia air brush against her face. She passed manicured lawns, luxury car dealerships, and storefronts with names she recognized from fashion magazines. This part of town always felt a little like stepping into a different world, one of polished surfaces and hushed conversations. She didn't come here often, but she wasn't intimidated. She belonged everywhere she chose to be. Luxe Éclat sat on a quiet corner, its storefront gleaming with soft lighting and minimalist displays. Large glass windows showcased a single necklace on a velvet stand, a pair of diamond earrings, and yes, the tennis bracelet she remembered. Her breath caught just a little as she approached. It looked even more beautiful in person. She pushed the heavy glass door open. A soft chime sounded and cool air wrapped around her. The store was quiet, almost serene. Soft classical music played in the background, and the scent of sandalwood lingered faintly in the air. A young woman in a crisp white blouse and black slacks stood near the counter, polishing a display case. She looked up with a polite smile. "Good afternoon," the associate said. "Welcome to Luxe Éclat. Can I help you find something today?" "I'd like to see the diamond tennis bracelet in the window," she replied, her voice calm and clear. "The one with the platinum setting." "Of course," the associate said, her smile widening slightly. "That's one of our most popular pieces. Let me get it for you." As the woman disappeared into the back, she took a slow breath. Her heart wasn't racing, she wasn't nervous, but there was a quiet excitement humming under her skin. This was her moment. No one was watching. No one needed her to be anything but herself. The associate returned with a small black tray, the bracelet resting on a bed of navy velvet. She placed it gently on the glass countertop. "Here it is. It's 18-karat white gold with 3.5 carats of round, brilliant diamonds, all G-color and VS1 clarity. The clasp is triple secured for safety." She nodded, impressed. She'd done her homework. She knew what those terms meant, not because she was a jeweler, but because she was thorough. In her line of work, details saved lives. She picked up the bracelet carefully, turning it in the light. The diamonds sparkled without being gaudy. It felt substantial in her hand, but not heavy, elegant, timeless. "How much is it?" she asked. $28,500, the associate said, watching her closely. She didn't flinch. She'd expected that number. She'd saved for it in her mind for weeks. "I'll take it," she said simply. The associate blinked just once. "Oh, wonderful. Would you like to try it on first?" "Yes, please." The woman carefully fastened the bracelet around her wrist. It fit perfectly, snug but not tight, the diamonds catching the light with every slight movement. She held her arm up, turning it slowly. It looked like it belonged there. Not like a costume, not like a display, but like a part of her story. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "I'm so glad you like it," the associate replied, though her tone had shifted slightly, less enthusiastic, more cautious. "I'll just need to process your payment. Do you have your card ready?" She reached into her purse and handed over the black Amex. The associate took it with a nod and walked toward the register at the back of the store. But instead of ringing up the sale, she paused near a small office door, glanced back at her, then stepped inside and closed the door halfway. She didn't think much of it at first. Maybe they needed to verify the card. High-value purchases sometimes required that. She waited patiently, admiring the bracelet on her wrist, imagining how it would catch the light at the hospital gala next month. But minutes passed, then 5, the music played on. No one else came into the store. She shifted her weight, suddenly aware of how quiet it had become. Through the half-open office door she heard low voices, urgent, hushed. The associate was speaking quickly to someone else. A man's voice answered, firm and clipped. Her stomach tightened. She straightened her posture. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was a doctor. She'd worked hard. She had the money. She'd been polite. But that old familiar feeling crept in, the one she'd felt in college when security followed her through the library, or at the car dealership when the salesman assumed she wanted financing before she'd even spoken, the feeling of being watched, judged, doubted, just because of how she looked. She took a slow breath. Don't assume, she told herself. Maybe they're just checking inventory. Maybe the system is slow. But then the office door opened fully and a man in a dark suit stepped out. He was older, with silver at his temples and a posture that said he was in charge. His eyes locked onto hers immediately, not with warmth but with assessment, like she was a problem to be solved. "Ma'am," he said, walking toward her with a practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm Derek, the store manager. My associate mentioned you're interested in the tennis bracelet." "I've already decided to buy it," she said evenly. "She has my card." Right, he said, nodding too quickly. "We just need to run a quick verification on high-value transactions. Standard procedure. Would you mind stepping over here for a moment?" He gestured toward a small seating area near the window, away from the counter, away from the exit. She didn't move. "Why do I need to step away? I'm happy to wait here." "It's just for security," he said, his voice dropping slightly. "It'll only take a minute." She looked at him. Really looked, saw the tension in his jaw, the way his fingers tapped against his thigh. He wasn't just being cautious. He was suspicious. "Of her, is there an issue with my card?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. No issue at all," he said, but his eyes darted toward the office again. "We just want to make sure everything's in order." She crossed her arms slightly, the diamond bracelet glinting under the lights. "I've been a customer here before. I've never been asked to step aside during a purchase. You have?" He sounded surprised, almost skeptical. "I browsed last month," she said, "and I've shopped at your sister store in Miami. I know how this works." He hesitated. Then with a tight smile, he said, "Of course. My apologies. Let me just check with our system." He turned and walked back to the office. This time, the door closed all the way. She heard muffled voices again, more urgent now, and then unmistakably the sound of a phone being dialed. Her pulse quickened. She wasn't imagining it. They were calling someone. Probably security. Maybe the police. She stood very still. She thought about leaving, just walking out. But that would look guilty. And she wasn't guilty of anything except being a black woman with money in a store that didn't expect her to have it. So she stayed. She stood tall. She kept her hands visible. She didn't touch anything else. She watched the street through the window, noting the time, the cars passing by. If something happened, she wanted to remember everything. 5 minutes later, 2 police officers walked in. They weren't in full uniform, just plain clothes, but with badges clipped to their belts. They scanned the room, then their eyes landed on her. One gave the manager a small nod. Her stomach dropped. But she didn't look away. She met their gaze directly. The manager approached again, this time with the officers trailing a few steps behind. "Ma'am," he said, his voice lower now, almost apologetic but not quite. "These officers are just here to assist with verification. It's routine for purchases over 25,000. She looked at the officers. "What exactly are you verifying?" she asked calmly. "Just your identity and the card," one of them said. "Standard protocol." "I have my driver's license," she said. "And the card is mine. You can call the number on the back if you'd like." "We will," the officer said, "but we'll need you to step outside with us for a moment." "No," she said firmly. "I'm not stepping outside. I'm a customer making a legal purchase. If you have questions, ask them here." In front of witnesses, the manager's face paled slightly. He hadn't expected this. He'd probably assumed she'd comply quietly, embarrassed into submission. But she wasn't embarrassed. She was angry and hurt, and tired, so tired, of having to prove she belonged. "I'm recording this," she said, pulling out her phone and opening the camera. "For my protection." The officers exchanged glances. The manager swallowed hard, and right then, the front door chimed again. An older woman in a floral dress walked in, holding a shopping bag. She stopped short when she saw the scene. The black woman standing calmly with her phone raised, the two officers, the nervous manager. "Oh," the woman said. "Is everything all right?" Before anyone could answer, she squinted at the woman with the bracelet. "Wait, Dr. Johnson? From Children's Hospital?" She turned slightly. "Yes, that's me." "Oh my goodness," the woman exclaimed, stepping closer. "You treated my granddaughter last winter, leukemia. You sat with us for hours when we were scared out of our minds. You even brought her a stuffed panda when she couldn't sleep." She gave a small, tired smile. "I remember Lily. How is she doing?" "Thriving. Back in school dancing again. You gave us our miracle." The woman turned to the manager, her voice sharpening. "What on earth is going on here? This woman saved my granddaughter's life." The manager's mouth opened, then closed. The officers shifted uncomfortably. In that moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. But that moment, the recognition, the truth spoken aloud, was the first crack in the wall of suspicion that had been built around her. And though the confrontation wasn't over, something had already shifted. Because now she wasn't just a suspicious shopper. She was Dr. Johnson. She was someone's healer, someone's hope, and no one could take that away. Not with a sideways glance, not with a phone call, not with doubt dressed up as policy. She lowered her phone slightly, but kept it recording. "Let's get this sorted," she said, her voice quiet but unshakable. "Because I'd still like to buy my bracelet." The air in the boutique had changed. It wasn't just cool anymore. It felt heavy, like the kind of stillness that comes right before a storm breaks. The manager stood frozen for a second, his polished composure cracking at the edges. The two officers shifted their weight, suddenly unsure whether they were here for a routine check or something far more complicated. And the woman who'd just walked in, the grandmother with the floral dress, kept her eyes locked on the manager, her expression a mix of disbelief and quiet fury. "You don't recognize her?" the older woman said, her voice low but sharp. "This is the doctor who stayed past midnight on a Tuesday to explain Lily's treatment plan to us when no one else would. She didn't have to do that, but she did." The manager swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I didn't know," he stammered. "We were just following protocol." "Protocol for what?" the grandmother shot back. "For someone who walks in looking professional, asks intelligent questions, and pulls out a valid credit card? Or is your protocol only for people who look like her?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. His face flushed and he glanced toward the officers as if hoping they'd take over. But they weren't moving. One of them pulled out a small notepad, but he didn't write anything down. He just stood there, hands loose at his sides, watching. The woman with the bracelet, the doctor, didn't say a word. She just stood there, calm, phone still recording, her gaze steady. She didn't need to defend herself anymore. The truth had already walked through the door in the form of a grateful grandmother. But she also knew this wasn't over. Not really, because even if they apologized now, even if they handed her the bracelet with a bow, the damage had already been done. The assumption had been made. The call had been placed. And that kind of wound didn't heal with a quick sorry. The manager finally cleared his throat. Let's just verify the card," he said, forcing a professional tone. "No need for anyone to be upset." He turned and walked quickly back to the register, snatching up the black Amex card from the counter like it might burn him. He swiped it slowly, deliberately, as if giving the machine extra time to reject it. But the screen blinked green almost instantly. Approved, $20,500, he stared at it, then swiped it again. Same result. The officers exchanged another look. One of them stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said to the doctor, "do you mind showing us your ID?" She didn't flinch. She reached into her wallet and handed over her driver's license without a word. He studied it, then compared her face to the photo. Nodded, handed it back. "Everything checks out," he said quietly, almost to himself. The other officer leaned in. "So, we good?" "Yeah," the first one said. "We're good," but good didn't feel like the right word. Not when a woman had been treated like a criminal for buying something she could afford. Not when 2 police officers had been pulled away from real emergencies to stand in a jewelry store because someone assumed the worst based on skin color. The manager came back, holding the receipt and the bracelet in a small black box. His hands were slightly shaky. "Dr. Johnson," he said, using her name for the first time, I sincerely apologize. This was a misunderstanding. We appreciate your business, and we'd like to offer you a complimentary gift card for the inconvenience." She looked at the box, then at him. "A gift card?" she said, her voice quiet but firm. "You called the police on me because I wanted to buy a bracelet, and now you're offering me a gift card?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. What could he say? "We'll do better" sounded hollow. "It won't happen again" felt like a promise he had no right to make. "I don't want a gift card," she said. "I want you to understand why this hurt. I walked in here feeling proud of my work, proud of how far I've come. And within minutes I was made to feel like I didn't belong, like I was stealing, like my success was suspicious." The grandmother stepped closer. "She's right," she said. "You saw a black woman with money and assumed the worst. Would you have done that if she were white?" The manager didn't answer. He just looked down at the floor. The doctor took a deep breath. "I'm going to buy the bracelet," she said, "because I earned it. But I'm also going to file a formal complaint with your corporate office. And I'm going to share this video unless you commit to real change." He nodded quickly. "Of course, absolutely. We'll cooperate fully." She signed the receipt without looking at him, took the box, slipped the bracelet back onto her wrist. It felt different now. Not just beautiful, but heavy with meaning. A symbol not just of success, but of survival. As she turned to leave, the grandmother touched her arm gently. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for Lily, but for standing your ground today." The doctor gave her a small smile. "Thank you for speaking up." Outside, the sun was still shining. Cars passed. People walked dogs, carried shopping bags, laughed on their phones. Life went on, as if nothing unusual had happened inside that quiet boutique. But she knew better. She'd felt the shift, the moment when respect was withheld, then reluctantly returned. The moment when dignity had to be demanded instead of given freely. She got into her car and sat for a long time before starting the engine. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, the diamonds catching the afternoon light. She thought about her patients, the little boy who'd taken his first steps after chemo, the teenager who'd graduated high school despite everything, the parents who hugged her like she was family. They never doubted her. They saw her for who she was, capable, caring, worthy. Why was it so hard for others? She drove home slowly, replaying the scene in her mind. Not with anger exactly, but with a deep, tired sadness. She'd spent her life proving herself in rooms where people assumed she didn't belong. Medical school, residency, hospital board meetings. And now, even in a jewelry store on a day meant for celebration, she'd been reduced to a stereotype. When she got home, she didn't take off the bracelet. She made tea, sat by the window, and watched the city lights come on one by one. She thought about calling a friend, but she wasn't ready to talk yet. She needed to sit with it, to understand what she wanted to do next, because walking away wasn't enough. Staying silent wasn't enough. This wasn't just about her. It was about every black woman who'd been followed in a store, questioned at a bank, or eyed suspiciously in a space where she'd earned her place. It was about the message that luxury, success, and peace of mind weren't meant for people who looked like her. She opened her laptop, typed a few sentences, then deleted them. Started again. Today I went to buy myself a gift, something small to mark a big year of saving lives. Instead, I was treated like a thief. The store called the police. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I'm a black woman with a black credit card. She paused. Took a breath. Kept writing. This isn't the first time. It won't be the last. But maybe, just maybe, if enough of us speak up, stores like this will stop assuming the worst about us. We deserve to shop in peace. We deserve to celebrate without suspicion. We deserve to be seen. She attached the video, short, clear, showing her calm demeanor, the manager's nervous glances, the officers arriving, the grandmother's intervention. She didn't add music, didn't edit for drama, just let it speak for itself. Before she hit post, she reread it. Made sure her words were firm but not hateful, clear but not cruel. She wasn't trying to destroy anyone. She was trying to wake them up. Then she clicked share. Within minutes, her phone buzzed. A text from a colleague. Saw your post. So proud of you. That took courage. Another from a former patient's parent. We've got your back. Let us know how to help. She didn't expect it to go viral. She just wanted to be honest. But by morning, the video had thousands of views. Then tens of thousands. News outlets started calling. People shared their own stories of being followed in stores, denied service, questioned for using their own credit cards. The hashtag drawn on shopping while black began trending. Back at Lux Eclat, the manager sat in his office, blinds drawn, staring at his computer screen. His inbox was flooded. Corporate had sent an urgent message. We need to talk. First thing tomorrow. His stomach churned. He'd been in retail for 20 years. He prided himself on being fair, professional, by the book. But now he saw it, the blind spot he'd never noticed. He'd been trained to watch for suspicious behavior, but no one had ever taught him that his own bias might be the real problem. He replayed the security footage from that afternoon. Watched her walk in. Confident, composed, dressed like someone who belonged in boardrooms and operating rooms, not back alleys. Watched himself whisper to his associate, eyes narrowed. Watched the way he'd gestured for her to step aside, as if she were contaminating the space. And then, the grandmother's voice cutting through the tension like a knife. This is the doctor who saved my granddaughter. He covered his face with his hands. Shame washed over him hot and thick, not because he'd made a mistake, everyone made those, but because he'd let his assumptions override his judgment. Because he'd treated a woman with disrespect simply because she didn't fit the image in his head of who should be buying a $28,000 bracelet. He thought about calling her, apologizing properly, but what could he say that wouldn't sound empty? I'm sorry I judged you. I didn't mean to be racist. Those words wouldn't undo what happened. They wouldn't erase the fear she must have felt when the officers walked in. He opened a new email. Typed slowly. To whom it may concern at corporate compliance, and I'm writing to report an incident that occurred under my supervision today. I made a serious error in judgment based on unconscious bias. I called the police on a customer who was doing nothing wrong except being a black woman making a high-value purchase. I take full responsibility. I request immediate anti-bias training for myself and my entire team. I also recommend we revise our policy on involving law enforcement. No single employee should have that authority, without multiple verifications and clear evidence of wrongdoing. This is not just about one customer. It's about who we are as a company, and I failed today. He hit send, then sat back, exhausted but clearer than he'd been in years. Meanwhile, the doctor woke up to her phone lighting up like a Christmas tree. Messages from strangers thanking her. Journalists asking for interviews. Friends offering to accompany her shopping, just in case. She smiled at the kindness. But what moved her most were the messages from young black girls. You make me proud to be me. I want to be a doctor like you. Thank you for showing us we belong everywhere. She got dressed, put on her white coat, and headed to the hospital. Her patients didn't care about tennis bracelets or viral videos. They cared that she showed up, that she listened, that she fought for them. And as she walked through the hospital doors, bracelet glinting under the fluorescent lights, she knew one thing for sure. She wouldn't let what happened yesterday dim her light. If anything, it made her shine brighter, because her worth wasn't decided by a store manager's suspicion. It was written in the lives she'd saved, the hope she'd given, the quiet courage she carried every single day, and that no one could take away. The morning after the incident, the doctor woke before her alarm. Sunlight hadn't even crept over the skyline yet, but her mind was already wide awake. She lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside. Cars on distant streets, a neighbor's dog barking, the soft whoosh of a breeze through the trees. It was peaceful, normal, and yet everything felt different. She glanced at her wrist. The bracelet was still there. She hadn't taken it off. Not out of pride, but because removing it would have felt like letting the doubt win, like saying, maybe they were right to question me. And she knew deep in her bones they weren't. She got up, made coffee, and sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open. Overnight, her post had spread further than she'd imagined. Tens of thousands of shares, comments pouring in. Not just from people who'd experienced the same thing, but from store employees, managers, even security guards admitting they'd seen bias play out in their own workplaces. One woman wrote, "I work at a luxury handbag store. Last month, I watched my manager follow a black customer for 45 minutes while ignoring 3 white customers who actually stole items. I didn't say anything. I'm sorry." That message hit hard. It wasn't just about one bad apple. It was about a system that let suspicion fester in silence. Her phone buzzed. A local news station wanted to interview her. She hesitated. She wasn't looking for fame. She was a doctor, not a public figure. But then she thought about the little girl in her oncology ward who'd asked yesterday, "Do people ever treat you badly 'cause you're black?" She'd nodded gently, and the girl had said, "But you're the smartest person I know." That moment stayed with her. Maybe speaking up wasn't about her. Maybe it was about showing that girl, and others like her, that your worth doesn't shrink because someone refuses to see it. She agreed to a short, in-studio interview. No cameras at her home. No sensational headlines. Just truth, told plainly. Later that morning, she walked into the hospital like any other day. White coat over her blouse, stethoscope around her neck, badge clipped to her pocket. But as she passed the nurses' station, one of the veteran nurses looked up and gave her a slow, knowing nod. "Saw the video," she said quietly. "You handled that like the professional you are." A few steps down the hall, a young resident stopped her. "Doc, can I just say, thank you. My sister went through something similar last year at a car dealership. She didn't have the courage to speak up. You gave her that today." She smiled, touched but not surprised. Pain shared often becomes power for someone else. Her first patient was a 9-year-old boy recovering from a bone marrow transplant. He was pale but smiling, coloring in a superhero comic. "Dr. J," he called out as she entered. "Look, I made you a cape." She sat on the edge of his bed, letting him pin a paper cape to her white coat with a safety pin. "This is amazing," she said. "Now I'm officially a superhero." "You always were," he said matter-of-factly. In that moment, none of yesterday's humiliation mattered. Here she wasn't a suspicious shopper. She was Dr. J, the one who remembered his favorite juice, who high-fived him after blood draws, who never made him feel like a case file. But the outside world hadn't forgotten. By lunchtime, corporate headquarters for Lux Eclat had issued a public statement. It was carefully worded, apologetic but vague. They expressed deep regret over the customer's experience and promised a full internal review. They didn't name her. They didn't admit racial bias outright, just a breakdown in protocol. She read it twice. It felt like a bandage on a broken bone, well-intentioned but not enough. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello, Dr. Johnson," a man's voice said. He sounded older, weary. "This is Derek Holloway, the manager from Lux Eclat." She paused. "Yes, I don't expect you to forgive me," he said quickly, as if afraid she'd hang up. "But I needed to call you myself. What I did was wrong. Not just unprofessional, wrong. I let my own assumptions blind me. I saw a black woman spending a lot of money, and without even realizing it, I thought, that doesn't add up. And that's on me. Not you, never you." She stayed quiet, listening. "I've spent the last 24 hours replaying it," he continued, "watching the footage, talking to my team. I realized I've never once called the police on a white customer, no matter how flashy or loud they were. But you? You were calm, polite, dressed like a professional, and I still doubted you. That's not security. That's prejudice." His voice cracked slightly. "I've requested mandatory bias training for every employee in our store. Corporate's rolling it out nationwide because of your post, and I've asked to be placed on leave while they investigate. I don't deserve to manage people if I can't see them clearly. She took a breath. Thank you for calling, she said finally. Most people wouldn't. I'm not doing it for praise, he said. I'm doing it because it's the right thing, and I hope you'll accept my apology even if you don't trust me. I accept the apology, she said. But trust has to be earned. And actions matter more than words. I know, he said. And I'll spend a long time earning it if I ever can. They hung up. She sat for a while staring out the window. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't justice. But it was a start. A human being had looked in the mirror and admitted his fault. That took courage, too. Later that afternoon, she received an email from the hospital's legal department. A representative from a civil rights organization had reached out, offering pro bono support if she wanted to file a formal complaint with the city's Human Rights Commission. They explained the process: documentation, testimony, possible mediation. No lawsuit unless she wanted one. Just accountability. She thought about it all evening. She didn't want to drag this out for months, but she also didn't want it to disappear quietly, as if it never mattered. The next day, she met with the legal team. They sat in a quiet conference room, sunlight streaming through the blinds. She told them everything: the calm before the storm, the manager's nervous glances, the officers arriving, the grandmother's voice cutting through the tension. She played the video. She showed the receipt, the corporate statement, Derek's call log. One of the lawyers, a soft-spoken woman with silver hair, leaned forward. You don't have to do this alone, she said. We can help you turn this into something that protects others. What do you mean? The doctor asked. Your case could become a model for how retail stores handle high-value transactions. We could push for policy changes, like requiring 2 managers to agree before calling law enforcement, or banning calls based solely on gut feeling. Real safeguards. That sparked something in her. Not revenge, not shame, but legacy. She agreed to move forward, not for herself, but for the next black woman who walks into a store with her head high and her card ready. Meanwhile, the story kept growing. A national morning show invited her on. She accepted, but only if they also interviewed a retail trainer who specialized in unconscious bias. She didn't want to be the angry black woman on TV. She wanted solutions. The interview aired on a Tuesday. She wore a simple blouse, her hair in a neat twist, the bracelet visible on her wrist. She spoke calmly, clearly. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She just told the truth. I wasn't angry when they called the police, she said. I was heartbroken. Because I've spent my life proving I belong. In medical school, in the hospital, in every room I walk into. And still, someone looked at me and saw a threat instead of a person. The host asked what she hoped would come from this. I hope stores stop treating black customers like suspects, she said. I hope managers learn that professional appearance doesn't have a skin color. And I hope little girls watching this know, your success is never suspicious. Your joy is never out of place. The segment ended with a graphic. Over 200 luxury retailers have pledged to review their security policies this week. Back at the hospital, her patients didn't care about TV appearances, but her colleagues did. That evening, the chief of staff called her into his office. He didn't offer praise. He offered partnership. We're starting a hospital-wide initiative on bias in healthcare, he said. We want you to lead it. If you're willing, she nodded. I am. Because healing wasn't just about medicine. It was about dignity. And everyone, patients, customers, strangers on the street, deserved to be treated with it. A few days later, she received a package. No return address. Inside was a handwritten note on thick cream paper. Thank you for your courage. You reminded us that luxury isn't just about price, it's about respect. Enclosed is a small token of our commitment to do better. Beneath the note was a donation receipt. $2,800 to the Children's Cancer Research Fund at her hospital, the exact amount of the bracelet. She didn't know if it was from the store, the corporate office, or someone else entirely, and it didn't matter. What mattered was the message: we see you. We hear you. We're changing. She framed the receipt and hung it in the oncology playroom next to the kids' drawings and get-well cards. A quiet reminder that sometimes pain can plant seeds of good. That weekend she went shopping again. Not for jewelry, just groceries. As she walked through the aisles, she noticed things she'd never paid attention to before. The way cashiers smiled at some customers but not others. how security lingered near certain sections. She didn't feel angry. She felt awake. At the checkout, the cashier, a young woman with tired eyes, scanned her items. When she saw the doctor's hospital ID badge on her keychain, she paused. "Are you a doctor?" she asked. "Yes," the doctor said. "My little brother's in oncology," the cashier said softly. "At your hospital, is he?" The doctor asked gently. "He's doing okay," the girl said, eyes glistening. "Thanks to people like you." They stood there for a moment, two strangers connected by hope. The cashier rang up the last item. "Your total is $42.87. The doctor handed her a $50 bill. "Keep the change," she said. "For your brother." The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." As the doctor walked out, bag in hand, she realized something. She didn't need a bracelet to feel worthy. She'd always been enough. The store hadn't given her value. She'd carried it in all along. But the bracelet? She'd keep it. Not as a trophy, but as a compass. A reminder that standing up for yourself is also standing up for everyone who comes after you. And that, more than diamonds, was priceless. The days after the interview blurred together in a strange mix of exhaustion and quiet purpose. The doctor still woke before dawn, still made her coffee, still walked the same halls of the hospital where children's laughter and beeping monitors formed the soundtrack of her life. But now there was something else, a new weight, not heavy but steady, like a compass needle finding true north. People looked at her differently, not with pity or curiosity, but with a kind of quiet respect, as if they'd always known she carried more than just a stethoscope in her pocket. She'd agreed to meet with the leadership team of Lux Eclat's parent company, not in a courtroom or a press room, but in a small conference room at their regional office. No cameras, no lawyers hovering in the corners. Just 4 people sitting around a table with bottled water and notepads, 2 corporate executives, a diversity consultant they'd hired within 48 hours of the video going viral, and her. She walked in wearing the same navy suit from that day at the boutique. The bracelet was on her wrist, not as a statement, but as a witness. She wanted them to see it, to remember. The senior executive, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a calm voice, stood to greet her. "Thank you for coming," she said, offering a handshake that was firm but not performative. "We've spent the last week listening, not just to you, but to our employees, our customers, and our own blind spots." The doctor nodded. "I appreciate that." They sat. No one rushed. The consultant, a soft-spoken man with graying hair and a gentle demeanor, opened the meeting. "We've reviewed the footage. We've spoken with Derek. We've read every comment, every story shared online. And we've come to one clear conclusion. This wasn't just a mistake. It was a symptom of a much larger problem in how we train our staff to see people." He paused. "You didn't just expose a bad moment. You exposed a broken system." The doctor leaned forward slightly. "Then fix it. Not with a press release, with real change." And that's what they proposed. First, mandatory unconscious bias training for every employee, sales associates, managers, security, even corporate leadership. Not a 1-hour online module that people click through while checking email, but immersive in-person workshops led by experts who understood both retail and racial dynamics, role-playing scenarios, real conversations. No more checking a box. Second, a complete overhaul of their suspicious activity protocol. From now on, no single employee, no matter their title, could call law enforcement based on appearance, behavior, or gut feeling. Any call would require 2 managers to independently verify concerns, document specific behaviors, not assumptions, and consult a corporate ethics hotline before dialing 911. And even then, police would only be called for actual theft or threats, not for someone paying with a valid card. Third, they wanted her help. Not as a figurehead, but as a real advisor. They asked if she'd co-design a customer equity initiative, a program to ensure that every person who walked into their stores, regardless of race, gender, or how they dressed, was treated with the same level of trust and respect. She was quiet for a long moment. She thought about saying no, about walking away and letting them figure it out on their own. But then she thought about the next woman, the one who might not have a grandmother to vouch for her, who might not have a phone to record, who might just leave in shame and never speak up. "Yes," she said finally, "but only if this isn't just for show. If it's real, lasting, and measurable. It will be," the executive promised. "We'll publish annual reports on our progress. We'll invite third-party audits, and we'll share our training materials with other retailers. Because this isn't just our problem. It's an industry problem, she believed them. Not because they sounded sincere, though they did, but because they'd already started acting. Derek had been placed on administrative leave, not fired, but required to complete 40 hours of anti-bias education before returning. The store had hosted a listening session with local black business leaders. And the donation to the Children's Cancer Fund? That had come from the CEO's personal account. As the meeting ended, the executive handed her a folder. Inside were draft policies, training outlines, and a letter inviting her to join their newly formed Inclusion Advisory Council. "You've already changed us," the woman said. "Now help us change others." Back at the hospital, her own world was shifting too. The chief of staff had kept his word. She was now leading a hospital-wide initiative on bias in healthcare, training nurses, residents, even front desk staff to recognize how assumptions could affect patient care. She'd already held 2 workshops. In one, a young nurse admitted she'd once assumed a black teenager complaining of stomach pain was just seeking drugs, only to learn hours later he had appendicitis. The guilt still haunted her. "That's why we do this," the doctor told her. "Not to shame, to heal." Her days grew longer but fuller. Mornings with patients, afternoons with policy drafts, evenings reviewing training modules or meeting with community advocates. She wasn't trying to be a hero. She was trying to build bridges between suspicion and trust, between silence and truth. One rainy Thursday, she got a call from the boutique's associate, the young woman who'd first helped her. She sounded nervous. "Hi, Dr. Johnson. It's me. From Lux Eclat." "Yes," the doctor said gently. "I remember you. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I saw how you carried yourself, so calm, so sure, and I still let my manager pull me into that. I should have spoken up. I should have said, she's a real customer. Treat her like one. You were following orders," the doctor said. "But now you know better." "I do," the associate said. "I signed up to lead the bias training sessions at our store. I want to help make sure no one else feels what you felt." "That means a lot," the doctor said. "Thank you." They talked for a few more minutes about fear, about courage, about how hard it is to stand up when you're just trying to keep your job. Before hanging up, the associate whispered, "You gave me permission to be brave." That night, the doctor sat on her balcony, watching the rain fall over the city. She thought about how change rarely comes from one grand moment. It comes from 1,000 small choices, like a manager calling to apologize, an associate choosing to lead, a grandmother speaking up, a CEO writing a check not for PR but for peace of mind. She also thought about Derek. She hadn't heard from him since their call, but she'd read that he'd enrolled in a community anti-racism course, not required, voluntary. That mattered. A few days later, she received an unexpected invitation to speak at a national retail leadership summit. The theme was rebuilding trust in luxury spaces. She almost declined. She wasn't in retail after all. But then she realized her story wasn't about jewelry. It was about humanity, and that belonged everywhere. She accepted. The night before the speech, she visited the oncology ward. Her favorite patient, the 9-year-old with the paper cape, was being discharged. He ran to her, backpack slung over one shoulder, hair finally starting to grow back in soft curls. "You're leaving?" she asked, smiling. "Yeah. Back to school Monday," he said, then lowered his voice. "But I'll still be a superhero, right?" "Always," she said, kneeling to his level. "And remember, real superheroes don't fight villains. They make the world kinder." He hugged her tight. "You're the best, Dr. J." As she walked back to her car, she felt lighter. Not because the work was done, it wasn't, but because she knew she wasn't alone anymore. People were waking up. Not perfectly, not all at once, but they were trying. The summit was held in a sleek downtown convention center. Hundreds of retail executives filled the ballroom, men and women in designer suits, name tags gleaming, coffee cups in hand. When she walked on stage, there was a hush, not awkward, respectful. She didn't start with anger. She started with a question. "How many of you have ever been followed in a store?" she asked. A few hands went up, mostly women of color. Then she asked, "How many of you have ever called the police on a customer?" Silence. "I'm not here to shame you," she said. "I'm here to ask you to see." Really see? Because when you assume someone doesn't belong, you don't just hurt them. You shrink your own world. She told her story simply. No drama, no blame. Just facts. The suit, the bracelet, the call, the grandmother, the video, the change. Then she showed a slide, a photo of her hospital's playroom with the framed donation receipt hanging on the wall. This, she said, is what accountability looks like. Not punishment. Repair. She ended with a challenge. Next time you see a customer who surprises you because of how they look, how they dress, how much they spend, ask yourself, am I seeing a person or a stereotype? And if it's the second, pause, breathe, choose better. The room was silent for a full 10 seconds after she finished. Then slowly people began to stand. Not all of them, but enough. A standing ovation that started in the back and rolled forward like a wave. Afterward, executives lined up to speak with her. One CEO said, "We're adopting your protocol tomorrow." Another asked for her training materials. A store owner from Chicago said, "My daughter is black. I never thought about how she might be treated when she grows up and walks into a place like mine." "Thank you for opening my eyes." She didn't take credit. She just handed out contact info for the civil rights group that had supported her. "They'll help you do this right," she said. On the flight home, she stared out the window at the clouds below. She thought about how just weeks ago she'd felt small and unseen in that boutique. Now she was helping reshape an entire industry's conscience, not through rage but through truth, not through demands but through invitation. When she landed, her phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. "Lily's grandma is in the lobby. Says she has something for you." She found the older woman sitting on a bench holding a small gift bag. "I saw your speech," she said, eyes shining. "You made me proud all over again." Inside the bag was a children's book, handwritten, illustrated with crayon. The title, Dr. J and the Day She Changed the World. On the dedication page, in a child's careful printing. "For Dr. J, thank you for teaching us to be brave." She hugged the woman tightly. "Tell Lily I'll read it to every patient." That night she didn't post about the book. She didn't share the standing ovation. She just tucked the bracelet under her pillow like a talisman and went to sleep. Because the real victory wasn't in the spotlight. It was in the quiet moments, the changed policy, the trained employee, the child who now believed she belonged everywhere. And that was worth more than diamonds. 6 months after that day in the jewelry store, the city felt different. Not because the buildings had changed or the traffic had lightened, but because something invisible had shifted in the air. It was the kind of change you couldn't measure with numbers alone, but you could feel in the way people held their heads a little higher, spoke a little more clearly, and expected to be seen for who they truly were. The doctor still walked the same hospital halls, still greeted her young patients with the same warm smile, still carried the quiet weight of saving lives. But now when she passed a luxury store window, she didn't tense up. She didn't brace for suspicion. She just kept walking, sometimes with the bracelet on her wrist, sometimes not, knowing she belonged wherever she chose to be. The ripple from that single afternoon had grown wider than anyone expected. Lux Eclat's new customer equity program had been rolled out to all 87 of their stores nationwide. Sales associates now wore small pins on their uniforms, not logos, but simple words, "I see you." The training modules she helped design were being used by department stores, car dealerships, even banks. One major credit card company reached out, asking to include her story in their employee onboarding. Not as a cautionary tale, they said, but as a compass. She'd said yes, but only if they committed to tracking real outcomes. Fewer unnecessary police calls, higher satisfaction scores among customers of color, more diverse hiring and management. She wasn't interested in symbolism. She wanted substance. Back at the hospital, her Bias in Healthcare initiative had become a model for other medical centers across the country. Nurses now used a simple checklist before making assumptions about pain levels or compliance. Front desk staff received training on how tone and body language could make a scared parent feel welcome or unwelcome. And every new resident spent their first week not just learning procedures, but learning people. One afternoon, she sat in on a training session where a young doctor admitted, "I used to think if a patient missed appointments, they just didn't care. Now I ask, what's getting in your way? Maybe it's childcare, maybe it's transportation, maybe it's fear." That small shift from judgment to curiosity was everything. Meanwhile, Derek, the store manager, had returned to work, not as a manager but as a trainee in the company's new Inclusion Ambassador program. He now co-led workshops with the very associate who'd once handed over the doctor's credit card in fear. They traveled to different stores sharing their story, how bias crept in quietly, how it hurt everyone, and how they were learning to do better. He never mentioned the doctor by name, but he always ended with the same line: assume competence, assume worth, assume the best until proven otherwise. Not the other way around. She heard about it through a mutual contact. She didn't reach out. She didn't need to. His actions spoke louder than any apology ever could. Then came the invitation she hadn't expected. A local university asked her to deliver the keynote at their annual ethics symposium. The theme: dignity as a right, not a reward. She almost declined. She wasn't an academic, after all, but then she remembered the little girl in her ward who'd asked, "Do people treat you badly 'cause you're black?" And how she'd answered, "Sometimes, but I never let it make me small." This was her chance to say that to a room full of future leaders. The night before the speech, she visited the hospital one last time. Her 9-year-old superhero patient was back for a checkup. He'd grown taller, his hair thick and curly now, his energy boundless. "I brought you something," he said, handing her a folded piece of construction paper. She opened it. It was a certificate drawn in bright markers. Officially certified, Dr. J is a real-life hero. Powers, kindness, bravery, and making bad things better. Signed with a wobbly heart, she tucked it into her bag, right next to her notes. The next day, the auditorium was packed, not just with students, but with professors, community leaders, even a few retail executives she recognized from the summit. She walked on stage without fanfare, wearing a simple blouse and her white coat. The bracelet was there, glinting softly under the lights. But she didn't draw attention to it. She began not with her story, but with a question. What if dignity wasn't something you had to earn, but something you were born with? She paused. Let it sink in. We live in a world that often treats dignity like a prize, she said. You get it if you dress right, speak right, spend right, look right. But that's not dignity. That's permission. And permission can be taken away. She told them about the boutique, the calm before the storm, the moment the officers walked in, the crushing weight of being doubted not for what she did but for who she was. But she didn't dwell on the pain. She focused on what came after. Because here's the truth, when you're denied dignity, you have two choices. You can shrink, or you can expand. You can let the world make you smaller, or you can grow so big that your light forces others to see clearly. She spoke about the grandmother who spoke up, the associate who chose to lead, the CEO who wrote a check not for headlines but for healing. Change doesn't come from one hero, she said. It comes from ordinary people choosing courage over comfort. Then she shared something new, something she hadn't told anyone before. The night after it happened, I cried, she admitted, her voice soft but steady. Not because I was embarrassed. Because I was tired of having to prove I belonged in spaces I'd earned my place in. Tired of smiling through suspicion. Tired of being strong all the time. She looked out at the audience. But then I remembered my patients. The little boy who high-fived me after his first chemo. The teenager who wrote me a letter saying I gave her hope. They never asked if I looked like a doctor. They just knew I cared. She ended with a promise, not to them but to herself, spoken aloud. I will never stop showing up. Not just in hospitals, but in boardrooms, in stores, in spaces that try to tell me I don't belong. Because my presence is my protest. My joy is my resistance. And my life, my full, unapologetic life, is my gift to the world. The applause started slowly, then built into something thunderous. But what moved her most wasn't the sound, it was the faces. Students wiping tears. Professors nodding slowly. A young black woman in the front row mouthing, "Thank you." Afterward, a line formed. Not for autographs, but for connection. A white store manager said, "I've been using your training guide. Last week, I stopped my team from following a customer." I said, "Let's assume she's exactly who she says she is." It felt right. A nursing student said, "I'm going into pediatrics because of you." An older man, eyes wet, said simply, "My daughter looks like you. I want her to walk through this world without fear." She listened to each one, held space for their stories, didn't rush. Later that evening, she drove to a quiet park on the edge of the city. She sat on a bench under a canopy of oak trees, the bracelet catching the last golden light of sunset. She thought about how far she'd come, not just in miles, but in peace. She hadn't set out to change an industry. She just wanted to buy a bracelet, to celebrate a year of hard work, to remind herself that joy was hers to claim. And in the end, that's exactly what she'd done. Only the joy had multiplied, spreading to places she never imagined. A few days later, she received a package from the university. Inside was a framed photo from the symposium, her on stage, hand raised mid-sentence, eyes alight with purpose. Beneath it, a plaque, for turning pain into progress and presence into power. She hung it in her office, next to the children's drawings and the framed donation receipt. Then came the final piece of the puzzle. The National Retail Association invited her to help draft new industry-wide standards for customer treatment. They wanted her to chair the committee. She agreed, but only if it included frontline workers, not just executives. The people who actually interact with customers, she said, should help write the rules. The first meeting was held in a sunlit conference room with representatives from 12 major brands. They debated wording, timelines, enforcement. But one principle was non-negotiable, and it came straight from her. No customer shall be subjected to heightened scrutiny based on race, gender, appearance, or perceived economic status. It passed unanimously. That same week, she got a call from Lily's grandmother. "She's starting high school next year," the woman said, voice thick with pride. "And she says she wants to be a doctor, just like you." The doctor smiled. "Tell her I'll save her a seat in the lab." As summer turned to fall, life settled into a new rhythm. The viral video faded from headlines, but its impact remained in policy manuals and training rooms, in the quiet confidence of a black woman walking into a store and knowing she wouldn't be followed. And the bracelet? She still wore it sometimes. Not every day, but on hard days or celebration days or days when she needed to remember. Her worth was never up for debate. One evening, as she walked home from the hospital, she passed a young woman standing outside a jewelry store, peering in the window with the same quiet longing she'd once felt. The woman was black, dressed in business attire, holding a tote bag with a law firm's logo. The doctor slowed her steps. Then gently she said, "Go in. You belong there." The woman turned, surprised. Then she saw the bracelet on the doctor's wrist. Recognition flickered in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. And with that, she pushed open the door. The doctor kept walking, heart full. She didn't need to stay. She'd already done her part, because the greatest legacy wasn't a policy or a speech or even a viral moment. It was the quiet chain of courage, one person choosing to believe in themselves so the next person could too. And that would last longer than any diamond.